Welcome to the Ojai City Council redevelopment, the Ojai City Council and the Ojai Redevelopment Agency successor agency regular meeting of April 22nd. Members of the public wishing to address the council or the agency are requested to fill out a speaker card, submit it to the city clerk, limit your comments to 3 minutes, and this is for items that are on the agenda. Roll call.
Councilmember Blatz.
Here.
Councilmember Clapp.
Here.
Councilmember Lara.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Here.
Mayor Strobel.
Present. And if Mayor Pro Tem Smith would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I was just thinking, it feels a little crowded up here tonight, but now I just realized why. Councilmember Blatz needs a second chair for her injured foot.
Oh, clap, not
Clap. Okay, it's going to be a rough night.
I hope.
Okay. We have a couple of presentations tonight. The 211 Information and Referral Program, and Tanya Kellum is here for that.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Kellum, 211 Director at Interface Children and Family Services. I just wanted to take this opportunity to share with you some information about our program, and thank you for the support that you've provided for 211. We have passing around the annual report, which is, I can't tell if this is a little bit loud or not, which is about the countywide service for 211, our calls. What we do is information and referral for community services. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, people can reach us by phone by just dialing 211. It's an absolutely free call. We actually can serve folks in over 150 languages through teleinterpretation, and we handle English, Spanish, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and Cantonese in a house in the center, and for really any number of different services, basic needs, mental health, substance abuse, housing, all different types of services, because it can be very confusing to figure out where to go when you have a need. So we have a lot of folks who have never reached out for services before, might not be familiar with what's there. So you'll see what that looks like across the county in the annual report, and then we put together kind of a special sheet for you about our Ojai callers. So as you can see, we helped 235 folks who identified themselves as being from Ojai. People don't have to tell us where they live. It helps us, of course, to find something that's close to them. They don't have to provide that information. And 104 of those were first-time callers to 211. So you can see a little bit about those folks. So our most common caller is from Ojai is actually a woman, generally, an English speaker between 30 and 54 years old, often hearing about us from a nonprofit agency or a friend or family member. And then you can see on the other side, the second side, what often folks are calling about. And you can see that compared against what the needs look like across the county too, because a lot of times it can be helpful to just get a sense of that, if there's a difference or how much things are the same. So across the county and in Ojai, our most common single request has to do with housing and utilities. It was just a very expensive place to live where we are, unfortunately, and so that's something that really hits folks hard when they have a financial need, obviously. Second, mental health and addictions, and then after that, income support and assistance, which are a variety of support programs that someone might be in need of. The most common unmet need, an unmet need being something where someone needs that thing, but there's not something specifically out there for them, because unfortunately we can't create service is around ongoing affordable housing in this particular area in Ojai. What we try to do in those situations is to talk the person through other ways to deal with that same need, maybe in another way, but we also want to log that so that we can know and you can know what some of those unmet needs in your community are. So hopefully that information is helpful to you. I'd be happy to answer any other questions. I know you've got a full agenda tonight too, so I also want to get out of your way so that you can get on with it, but I I wanted to just really thank you for the support that you're providing for the service. We could not do this without the support of cities. United Way, First Five are obviously our partners, but the support of the county and cities is just incredibly important to be able to provide this service. So thank you so much. And I'd be happy to answer any questions as well.
Any questions?
Madam Mayor, I do have a question.
Councilmember Laura?
Well, thank you. Obviously, this is great service, and I appreciate you coming down, giving us a presentation about it. You did mention that unmet needs, particular one that you're finding a challenge with is affordable housing. So what's a common response or a common answer given to them?
Well, unfortunately, the reason why it shows up as an unmet need, because you'll see that it's both a very frequent request, and also your most common unmet need. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of resources for that in this particular community and also really across our county. There's limited resources. So what we try to talk with the person about is what is available, and then also other options. Because usually that has to do with a financial need for not being able to maintain often where the person is. They know that they're challenged. We're not necessarily talking about folks who need a shelter type situation, because that would be counted differently. But it's more folks who maybe are realizing that where they are is too expensive and they need to be trying to find some other options. So what we try to talk folks through commonly would be, well, what are other ways? Are there any other systems that could help you free up some money so that maybe you can stay where you are, or thinking through some of the resources and agencies that could talk you through housing counseling. Some of the other ways to free up some money, for instance, would be if someone's eligible for the CalFresh program, formerly known as food stamps, because everyone has to pay for food. If you can get some help paying for that, maybe that can kind of lighten the load in another area. Unfortunately, there aren't programs to fix the whole piece from a housing perspective, because housing is so expensive. So we just try to help the person if it's that they're just missing it by a little bit. Maybe some of those programs will help, and otherwise connecting them with the resources that are available for that. Yeah, thanks. It's a difficult issue. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I actually had a question for.
All right.
Is this, when people call 211, are they limited because of their income, or can anyone?
Anybody can call. It's absolutely open to anyone. Yeah, we really try to make it as barrier-free as possible. It's free, available 24 hours a day, and really pretty much any language you can imagine we get calls in. So we try to make it as absolutely simple as possible to call, because I think that's the gap that we're trying to fill. Is it can be very confusing to figure out where to go for social services. If you want a pizza, you go to the phone book and you figure it out. With social services, it's very hard to figure that out. There are fantastic services out there, but if there's someone in need who doesn't know about it, then you've just missed an opportunity. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I
Yes.
have a question. Who are the operators?
Our call specialists?
Yeah.
They're fantastic. We have a great team. We bring folks in. Some of them have experience particularly around phone service, some around social services, some around both, and then they go through extensive training.
Are they volunteer? Or?
They are not. They're staff. They're paid staff.
Oh, I see.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Any other questions from council members? Okay.
I just couldn't agree with you more about the housing need. We have not built any affordable housing here in Ojai for 12 years, as far as I know. And we have a lot of workers who work with minimum wage or $12 an hour jobs who basically are struggling, and they live in very, very cramped housing. And I am hoping that we address that issue in the real near future. So
That'd be
thank you.
fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is a proclamation for Municipal Clerk Week. And I'm going to read that. You'd think I know how to open this by now. I wouldn't be proud of that. Whereas the office of the municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world, and whereas the office of the municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants, and whereas the office of the municipal clerk provides the professional link between citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels. And whereas municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality in rendering equal service to all. And whereas the municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community. And whereas municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the municipal clerk, been out of breath here, through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations. And whereas it is most important that we recognize the accomplishments of the office of the municipal clerk, now therefore I, Carlin Strobel, Mayor of the City of Ojai, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize the week of May 4th through the 10th as Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend appreciation to our municipal clerk, Rhonda Bayshore, and to all municipal clerks for the vital services they provide and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. Thank you, Rhonda.
It's nice to be recognized.
Would you like to say a few words?
Actually, I would. So I've been busy scanning in documents, and I have over 15,000 city documents scanned into our electronic management system. And during the week of May 4th, I'm going to open a kiosk in our lobby where people can come in from the public and search documents. So I would invite people to come in and check it out. We're going to hopefully have a reporter there. We're going to do a press release, and I'm very excited about this project. It will help people to be able to search more on their own, and of course, if they have any problems, I'll be there to help them.
Great.
And as the former city clerk of the City of Ojai, I just want to say that we as a city are so fortunate to have a person that is, first of all, such a joy to interact with, that has the skills, the knowledge, and the vision to help bring us forward to the extent our resources will allow us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to say that I was on the city council now, this is my 11th year, and I cannot tell you how our mayor, Carlin Strobel, when she was employed as the city clerk, did a job that was in the interest of the public. That was always her first and foremost priority. So I can't imagine a city running well without a city clerk who has that as their primary objective.
And that's also why the position of city clerk, even though it has gone on the ballot, I believe 4 times total, to make it an appointed position as opposed to an elected position. And each time it has gone on the ballot, it has failed. And so the citizens also recognize the value of having someone who answers directly to them for them.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll get off my high horse here on I like those guys. Okay, next, this section of our agenda is for public communications, items which are not on the agenda. Again, if you'd like to speak, I have 3 speaker cards. If you'd like to speak on items not on the agenda, we ask you fill out a speaker card, give it to our city clerk. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. Leonard Clafe. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Leonard Clay, 412 North Fulton Street in the city of Ojai. There's a little blurb in last Friday's paper that was called to my attention this afternoon. A representative of the Sheriff's Department was addressing some public gathering about the use of drones in Ojai. And that caused me some alarm. I'm going to ask the council to agendize this item for some point in the future so that the public will know what exactly is going on. There was a fabulous movie in 1974 starring Gene Hackman called The Conversation. And it was a low-budget movie, and he played a surveillance expert. And it was frightening, the technology that was available in 1974. 25 years later, in 1998, Gene Hackman was in another movie that was not nearly as good, Enemy of the State, and he played essentially the same character. And what was most fascinating about the second movie was the incredible increase in capacity for spying on civilians, on regular people. And the leap forward from 1998 to 2015 is even more scary. I am concerned about drones being used in the Ojai Valley because they can see everything, they can hear everything, they can go anywhere. And if it's our police department that is using them, then our citizens have the right to know how it's being used. So I would respectfully request that this item be put on the agenda for the future, just so that we can know what's going on. Thank you.
I would like to comment, this isn't a new issue. This is something that has been going on for at least a year. Is that about right? As far as the federal government awarding certain sites for the drone activity. But having said that, I do like the idea of putting it on a future agenda to give the public an update, to give the public, pardon?
I would second that.
Yeah. Just to give the public information as far as what the anticipated activities might be. And if Captain Kinney, or Chief Kinney, has an idea of, you may want to do that presentation, or you may have an idea of someone else that might be better informed.
There's a project, they're not called drones, they're actually called unmanned aerial vehicles. They're
UAV?
Yeah, and they're small, little planes like this, and there's a pilot program that's starting in special services of the Sheriff's Department. It's not up here in Ojai, and it's not being used in Ojai. It's just in the very initial stages. Whoever spoke in the paper, if it was one of my detectives, he misspoke. They're not in Ojai. If they were to be used in Ojai, it would only be used for a life-saving mission. And so if you had a child lost out in the Los Padres or something of that nature, maybe we would use one. But they are not being used to spy on the public. They're not being used in Ojai at all. But I'd be happy to have someone come up here and speak on that if you like.
Thank you. So if we could put that on a future agenda. My next speaker card, Christine Golden.
I'm here on the same topic. And I was very relieved to hear David Kenny say that it's not really happening in Ojai, but that means that the paper was really inaccurate, because the paper said that this chief of police, of Ojai Police, which was, that in itself was inaccurate, I understand, spoke on this at Sol Park this morning to the men's club to talk about the drones are going to be patrolling Ojai and other security measures. So whatever was said at Sol Park, something was going on. So anyway, I have some notes here. Oh, cat food, flea medicine, that's the wrong paper.
I believe it was in the Ojai Valley News.
Okay. So some of the things that I want to talk about are how important it is that this matter is vetted fully. You, as our city council, I think really needs to find out exactly what is going on, because it's not a police state. It's not a question of the police saying, we're going to do this, and government has no say over that. That is the definition of a police state. So I would implore you all to vet this, and I've done some research on it myself, and I have a handout to give you to get you started. The ACLU has published some wonderful policy points so that as a city council you could fashion a policy that would aim to put into place some protections against misuse. And when you see what I've printed out for you, you'll see that there are many forms of misuse once drones begin to be used. It's interesting to note that the FAA has ruled against drones, and the Supreme Court has yet to speak on the subject in any definitive manner. So there's all sorts of information out there, very easy to Google and find things out about this. At some point, if what happened today at Soul Park is accurate, then I believe a public meeting needs to be held so that everybody can ask questions. Why, in our little valley, do we need drones? What is their major purpose? Certainly there are very good reasons to use them. Search for someone in a wildfire, search for somebody in an accident. There's some really good reasons to use unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. But we also need policy safeguards. I also have a quote that I'd like to read to you from a man who spoke 200 years ago, Benjamin Franklin. And he said, "Those who surrender freedom for security will not have, nor do they deserve, either." So with that, I have a little packet for all of you.
Okay, my next speaker card, Michael Hansen.
Thank you, Kristen.
Just give them to,
Oh, okay. I have one for Rob.
Thank you.
Christine, did you give one of these to Rhonda?
I did not give one to Ron. I'm sorry, Ron. And you are a delight.
I'll get one from Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, and if anyone has anything they'd like to be distributed to the council, please remember to simply give it to Rhonda.
Oh, okay, thank you. Didn't know that.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Hanson.
Okay. I'm not an expert on this particular subject, no more than anybody who's listened to the news and all the panic going on with the Snowden and the NSA. But I do know from past experience with a law of how these things evolve. And a classic example is the seat belt, where it started out being something that manufacturers were going to put in the car so that we would have access to safety. And it was kind of our option. And then it didn't become our option but they wouldn't stop us just for that. And today they have literal checkpoints for it. And when you have a system that evolves like this, and you have, not be disrespectful about it, but when you have something that comes and is presented as being a real benefit, and it's dealt by agencies that do have their security, we get very suspicious that these types of processes will happen. And one of these days we'll wake up and ask ourselves, how did we get here? And so that's kind of the danger of it. And to a certain extent, probably the meaning of what Ben Franklin said in that quote was, maybe you're better off not even getting started in that direction.
Thank you. William Ulrich.
William Ulrich, 487 Gridley Road. Good evening. 20th of March 2014, I made an inquiry and request through Mr. Clark for a legal analysis and opinion from Mr. Fletcher regarding apparent serial communications made by Councilwoman Clapp with at least 3 members of the Planning Commission during the month of March. These communications were not conducted publicly, but were regarding the same subject, actions potentially pending by planning commissioners in reaction to the still ongoing issues of non-resident planning commissioners. Now, the question that I posed to the planning commissioners at that March 11th Planning Commission meeting was, has anyone made any contact with or otherwise attempted to discuss or influence any of the Planning Commission members relative to the recent resignation of a commission member and the current upheaval regarding non-resident planning commissioners? 3 of the planning commissioners went on record, including the chair. They were acknowledged in open session, and the chair, Mr. Merck. While I received also on March 20th an opinion from Mr. Clark, I have not as yet seen an opinion from Mr. Fletcher. Now, My issue was that I asked a question and I got an answer to another question that I didn't ask. Now, I repeated this request on the 1st of April, and perhaps that was my mistake. I have not yet received a response. Now, at the most recent Public Planning Commission interviews on Friday, the 19th of April, the planning chair stated that for the past several years it has been the custom for pre-meetings of 2 or 3 of the planning commissioners meeting privately with city staff to discuss upcoming planning commission matters. Mr. Fletcher, please advise if these non-scheduled and non-public planning commission meetings with city staff are in any manner violative of the Brown Open Meetings Act. Thank you.
Does staff want to make any comment?
Not really.
Okay. That's all the speaker cards I have. Anyone else in the audience like to speak?
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'd just like to take a minute to thank the Ojai Fire Safe Council for an event that happened on Saturday, April the 12th at Sarasota Park. They put on an excellent program helping the residents of Ojai prepare for wildland fires. We were met with, they brought together, obviously, the Ventura County Fire Department, the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, Search and Rescue, United States Forest Service, and other public agencies. We gave out handouts, talked about fire safety, defensible space, hands-on CPR, gave education to the kids, and it was a well-attended event. It was from 10 to 2, and I just want to recognize Will and Yvonne for their great work and bringing the community together, and this was, I believe, the 3rd annual, so just on behalf of all the public agencies, I want to recognize the Ojai Fire Safe Council for their great works and what they're doing to prepare us for wildfire. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? That's all the cards I have. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the consent calendar. Any comments on any item on the agenda from council?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm going to have to excuse myself from voting, pardon me, on a couple of the matters. I'm trying to figure out which ones because I was not present.
Okay.
It would be the...
You would abstain on April 8th?
Yeah, April 8th, and there's a second one, I believe. The April... That be it? Yeah, okay, that'd be it. So that would be item C. So I would move, I could go ahead and move to approve the consent calendar excluding item C, and then you could vote separately on item C?
Madam Mayor, the council member Clapp can simply abstain on that item without pulling it off the agenda.
Okay, fine.
I have a question about that. I have been told that even if you were not present at the meeting, but if you read the minutes of that meeting, you do not have to abstain. What is your opinion?
My opinion is exactly that. Now, it's been a tradition that folks that aren't present in the meeting abstain on minutes. In fact, it's not that you're not testifying to the accuracy, it's simply you've read the minutes and they're acceptable to you. So actually, in my opinion, you can even theoretically haven't read them, you can still approve them. I've never objected. It's been a tradition in almost all bodies to abstain on minutes, but you are correct.
I am
You don't
correct
have to,
on
it's
the
as
fact
a legal
that-
matter, don't have to abstain.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I think that the history of it's been not that if you've read the minutes, because you read the minutes, you don't know whether the minutes are accurate or not. It's if you listened to the meeting and then read the minutes, even though I don't think you have to do either.
Right.
Okay? But I think that's what it is that if you listened to the meeting and then reviewed the minutes, you didn't have to abstain.
That's actually probably more
I prefer
accurate.
we
statement.
stay with exactly what we've done traditionally,
Okay.
and that is, if a person is not here, they may abstain from the
I'm
minutes.
fine with that. I just wanted to know
And
your
so-
legal opinion.
You made a motion to approve the consent calendar. And you would abstain
I
from C?
abstained from C, yes.
And was there a second?
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to bring your attention to item 1G. There was a change in the contract, and I had the new page on the dais, so the new contract will reflect the CPI adjustments accordingly. And I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, and I'll just read this. In the contract, the CPI increase will be based on the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website and the website address, the Western Information Office. So it is a pretty insignificant change. Okay, roll call.
Blatz?
Yes?
Clapp?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes. Next on the agenda, public hearings. Text amendment of the Ojai Municipal Code amending Section 10-2.404 and Section 10-2.3003 of the city's zoning ordinance regarding residential building heights, TA 13-03, and adding Section 10-2.405, establishing a solar access height limitation. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. This particular item has to do with the height limit for residential zones. And there's been quite a bit of review of this a number of times at the City Council meetings and a number of times at the Planning Commission meetings. We also, as part of the Planning Commission process, sent letters to all owners of residential properties within the city and advised them of a public workshop that we held on this. We also, since we've modeled the solar access provisions after the city of Santa Barbara, had an official who is their expert in administering their solar access provisions come to the Planning Commission and respond to questions from the commissioners and from the public about the way it's administered. And then we also had an outreach meeting with representatives of the solar industry, and had one of them attend one of the Planning Commission meetings and respond again to questions from the commissioners. So I think this has been pretty well vetted. The height limit in residential zones is addressed in three ways. First of all, the height limit is lowered from 30 feet to 25 feet. However, the proposed ordinance allows an exception for architectural features, including the ridgeline of a roof, to exceed 25 feet if the Planning Commission can make certain findings that are more strict than the normal requirements just for design review. And those have to do with the ability of that higher architectural feature to fit into the design of the neighborhood. Secondly, we currently do not have a requirement for design review of single-story buildings. However, this adds a requirement if those buildings exceed 24 feet in height. And then thirdly, we propose a solar height limit. It's a solar height limit that's modeled after that which has been in place for quite a long time in the city of Santa Barbara and has worked well for them. And basically what it does is it prevents a new building or an addition to an existing building from casting a shadow on the adjacent property in a way that would block their solar access. The Planning Commission recommended several variations from what happened in the city of Santa Barbara. First of all, they've recommended that single-story residential buildings with a base elevation of less than 15 feet be exempted altogether. And the reason for that is it's very unlikely that a building of that size would create a solar access problem, and they felt that it would alarm people to have to go through the process of demonstrating that, and it really wasn't necessary. They also are anticipating that sometime in the future that we will create neighborhood plans, and as part of those neighborhood plans, we may have either neighborhood plans or specific plans that have a different solar access provision for a particular neighborhood than what the general rule is that we're approving here. And so they say, in that case, the neighborhood plan or the specific plan that's approved in the future should govern, not this. And then the third is that a residential building on a lot exceeding 20,000 square feet, for which the Planning Commission can grant a greater height
through the CUP process if, again, they can make certain findings that it allows reasonable solar access to the neighboring property. And that's because they felt with large lots over 20,000 square feet, there's a lot more flexibility with regard to placement of buildings on the lots. And so building a taller building doesn't necessarily trap an adjacent neighbor from building in such a way that they could still get solar access. So they did make those changes. Otherwise, basically, the way this works is you go up 12 feet at the property line and then out at a 30-degree angle from the northerly property line. And that defines the area that would be illuminated by the sun at the winter solstice, which is the lowest point in the sky. And you may recall that we worked up a little model that Amber Young very ably put together that we ran through the City Council and the Planning Commission at a workshop. There's also a couple other issues that came up during the Planning Commission review, but we didn't have time to fully research those during the Planning Commission review, but are recommending them for now. And one is that there's a statement that precedes Table 2-3 that reads as follows: "These limitations shall not apply to lots of record as of the date of the first zoning regulations became effective as to the lot." First of all, the construction of the sentence makes it hard to figure out what it's saying at all, but it kind of sounds like it's saying everything that follows doesn't apply. So we did as much research as we can to find the origin of that language, and we found when it occurred, but we couldn't figure out why it occurred. But we agree with the Planning Commission that that language does not serve any function and should be removed. The second is there was a footnote number 8 to Table 2.3, which is the table that gives the development standards for residential properties. And it said, "Where an adjacent parcel has been improved with a structure and has a grade separation exceeding 3 feet below the proposed structure, measured from the highest surface of grade beneath the proposed structure on hand and the existing structure on the other, and where the proposed structure, once completed, would interfere with the direct line of sight from the existing structure, the proposed structure shall not exceed 1 story or 15 feet in height, whichever is less." They felt that that was redundant, given the solar access height limit, and should be deleted. And after researching that, we also agree that that should be deleted. So that pretty much summarizes the matter. This is a public hearing, and we'd recommend that you conduct the public hearing and then consider introduction of the ordinance.
Any questions of staff from council?
Madam Mayor, I do have one clarification question. So the Planning Commission said anything over 20,000 square feet in lot size, you could go up above 24 feet, and it wouldn't trigger a design review, or?
Not exactly. I'm sorry, not exactly. This exception has to do with the solar height limit only. So what they're saying is that through the CUP process, you could have a building that exceeds the solar height limit if they can make the following findings. Number one, the building will not shade that portion of any adjacent residentially zoned lot which is occupied by a dwelling unit. And two, the characteristics of the adjacent residentially zoned lot or lots to the north are such that solar access for future dwellings is not unreasonably limited. So it's the 25-foot height limit and the 24-foot design review requirement both still apply. This is only an exception to the solar height limit if determined reasonable.
Okay. And just as a follow-up question, so say somebody were to get above 20,000 square feet lot, or to get 25 feet, just for that CUP, and then that triggers a design review, right?
It does.
So there's certain things that once a design review is triggered, they have to follow a bunch of other plans like the landscape, the water efficiency. Would that then trigger the homeowner to provide a plan for landscape, or? Because I know it's the next item, but as it says in the next item is that if a plan check like a design review was required, then they would also have to add another plans for landscape. Right. Is that right?
That we did. You raised that question earlier. It's a very good question, and it wasn't very clear in the other item. We did research that, and we determined that that does not apply to a single family residence. So single-family residence, when they're subject to design review, that does not trigger the requirement for the landscape plan, unless the landscape area, I believe, is more than 5,000 square feet.
Right.
Any other questions for staff from council?
I have a real quick question, Madam Mayor. On number 3, where the 25,000 square foot lot could not build a structure that would shade any portion of the adjacent residentially zoned lot, wouldn't be allowed. But on the single-story residential building under A, with the base elevation of 15 feet, that is exempt. So my question is, it's kind of convoluted, but if that 15-foot dwelling was 5 feet from the north setback, that would, I think, would probably shade a portion of the adjacent property. So how are those two different?
So there are, I guess I would characterize it as being overlapping requirements. So there's a general height limit, there's a design review requirement for single story, and then there's a solar access limit.
Mm-hmm.
And in every case, you have to comply with the most strict of those three. In this particular case, though,
This is
there,
talking
it's
solar.
making an exception to the solar access only, not to the 24-foot limit or to the 25-foot limit. And what it's saying is that on a larger lot, if you can demonstrate that having a height that's higher than the solar access height limit does not unreasonably impact the ability of the neighboring property to achieve solar access, it can then be approved through a CUP process.
So I'm saying, why shouldn't that apply to a square foot lot beneath 20,000 square feet? Because that's sort of what's being said up here under A, is that 20,000 square feet doesn't have to.
So the planning commission felt that strict application of the solar access limit makes sense in neighborhoods with small lots, but that when you get in neighborhoods with larger lots, there should be a provision to make an exception because there's more flexibility on where you can place a house where there's
and-
larger lots.
Right, and I think what I'm saying is 15 feet, 5 feet from the north side of a property line impede solar. Because they're saying disregard that. You can go to 15 feet.
So the base height limit is not at the property line. The base height limit is at the portion of the house that's nearest to the property line.
Right,
So-
right, so if it's 5 feet, does 15 feet impede solar?
No,
It doesn't.
It
So
does
that
not.
fits that whole,
it does.
okay, that was a really roundabout way to come up with that answer, but I got it, okay, good, all right, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? I'll open the public hearing. I don't have any speaker cards. Anyone in the audience wish to make a comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council.
Well, Madam Mayor, if there's no further comments from council, I would like to move to introduce an ordinance which approves text amendment TA 13-03, which amends residential height standards in Title 10, Chapter 2, Article 4, and design review standards for residential buildings in Title 10, Chapter 2, Article 20 of the Ojai Municipal Code, and adding a residential solar height, access height limitation to Title 10, Chapter 2, Article 4, and ask the city clerk to read the title of the ordinance only.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'm going to ask that we take a roll call on this and then ask the city clerk to read the ordinance by title only. Roll call?
Blatz?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Lara?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes. And if you would read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ojai, California, amending Title 10, Chapter 2, Articles 4 and 20 of the Ojai Municipal Code related to residential building heights and design review.
And that's it on that item. We're moving to item number 3, text amendment TA 12-03 for an ordinance entitled Water Efficient Landscape standards, amending Title 10, Chapter 2, Article 12 of the Ojai Municipal Code. Mr. Clark?
And I'll defer to Ms. Wald and Mr. Fletcher.
Good evening. Before you tonight, as you stated, is the Water Efficient Landscape Standards. The Water Efficient Landscape Standards started with the state legislature, which enacted a Water Conservation Landscaping Act of 2006. As part of this legislation, it was cities could adopt either a specifically tailored ordinance to their specific needs, or they could adopt a model ordinance. So the deadline for this was January 1st, 2010. And if a jurisdiction did not establish their own criteria, then they assumed the state's model water efficient landscape ordinance. So after that period of time, for several years now, the city has been working on developing a customized water efficient landscaping ordinance. And there was an ad hoc committee that worked on this that was consisted of a few planning commissioners. And they spent a significant amount of time reviewing this and developing this code. With the information that was gathered by the planning commissioners, the city attorney then developed this proposed ordinance and draft guidelines. I'd like to say that this proposed ordinance just codifies the mandatory elements of AB 1881, which was the legislation that was enacted in 2006. These provisions only apply to landscape projects that are part of a project that is otherwise subject to a discretionary approval of a landscape plan under the zoning code, or which otherwise requires a ministerial permit for landscaping or water, for a landscape or water feature. Those thresholds for this applying would be 2,500 square feet for landscape projects, except when homeowner-provided residential projects where the threshold is 5,000 square feet. Projects then must comply with the new section 10-2.1205, and they use water standards called maximum applied water allowance. This limit is a function of a number of factors, including local environmental conditions, types of plants, total landscape area. Project proponents will be required to submit a landscape document package that will include a detailed landscape plan, hydrozone plan with water budget and estimated water use, landscape soil report, and irrigation plan and irrigation design. This ordinance has been reviewed under the CEQA guidelines and found to be exempt by section 15061B3, as it is a general rule which applies to projects that don't have which have no potential for causing significant environmental effects on the environment. So with that, I guess I would also point out that as far as financial impacts are concerned, or maybe impacts to homeowners, that if a property owner submits for a covered project, any proposed landscaping will be evaluated with that compliance that already takes place through normal plan check process and under the existing plan check fee. And with that, I think that's kind of just covers it broadly, and I'm open to if you have any questions for me.
Any questions from council to staff? Mr. Lara?
Just for just for clarity. So we took the AB, what is it? 1881. And so we just took the content in there and basically modified or clarified the steps and put it into our ordinance. Is that correct? Or
I think that the general intent of doing this customized ordinance was to make it more user-friendly and make it where we felt it was more, well, I guess Joe's got his light on, so maybe he wants to add something to it, but that was my understanding. It was to customize it to where it was more user-friendly and easier for people here in Ojai to understand and integrate it into how we do things here in our permit processing.
do you know the difference, or were the thresholds, were they different? Or did we set them compared to the bill, or?
Yeah, well, I take that. So the thresholds are generally so what the legislature passed the bill, and then the state staff prepared what's called the model ordinance, and it's it's very large and very confusing, which became the law here because we didn't adopt a local one. We went through that and distilled out the essential requirements of what the legislature really wanted, which is a quantitative limit on water usage rather than qualitative. What I mean by that is that there's an older state water quality, water conservation ordinance that we adopted back in the 90s, which talked about the types of plants you could plant, the old drought tolerant concept, which is gone now. So the idea was rather than regulating what you can plant, what this law does is you can plant whatever you want, but everything you plant goes into a formula, the maximum allowable water usage, and you can mix and match your landscaping, your hardscape, your pervious landscaping, your bushes, turf, so long as it fits, as long as the allowable water budget is met. And that's really what was in the core of the state law. In terms of the thresholds, we did take, I also compared a lot of other cities that had adopted the local ordinance, and in many cases they liberalized the threshold when it came to owner-built single-family properties. State law was 2,500 square feet of landscape area. A lot of cities, and I recommend we follow that, is that in a homeowner self-built single-family project, not where it's a subdivision with a developer, but a self-built property, the threshold is 5,000 square feet of landscape area. And we put that in there to make it a little easier, a little less intimidating for the homeowner remodeling project or the custom home project that a homeowner wants to build. So that was a liberalization many cities adopted, slightly going above state law, but everyone, I think, we have the discretion to do so. Everything else is set in the state law, and it's, so I explain, it's math. And that's what you find in section 1205 is the mandated formula. And when we worked with Planning Commissioner Nolan, who does this professionally, she was very helpful in helping understand the mathematics of and how you find all the information about the types of plants and their allowance and how that goes into the formula. So if you're using, it does require, if you fall into this, you're required to use a licensed landscape architect or an architect who has experience in preparing these plans and doing those calculations, which are reviewed by staff as part of the permit and then reviewed by staff through a certificate of compliance when the project's complete. And then there's no ongoing policing after that. Basically when the building inspection is complete and the landscape architect certifies the project is compliant, that's the end of the policing of the project.
Well, thank you. And as a follow-up question to that, because I do have questions about the math, the equation, and I don't know if you have the answers to that. But it's interesting that, I mean, just for a general statement, I think that we do have to be conscious about how much water we use in the landscape, because when people have lawns, it uses about 60 or 70% of your water usage goes to lawn, so it's very high. But it's interesting what's defined a landscape area, because there's hardscape and there's certain items that are excluded from that area. So being a landscaper, I look at different things you could plant on your property, sometimes like vegetables or some fruit trees or whatever, and I'm cautious if that's taken into consideration when doing a landscape. And because we don't want to, because sometimes that will need to be irrigated a little bit more than the native plant, than the drought tolerant plant. And there's a lot of different philosophies about landscaping. And just to give you an example about, there's a new one out there called hole-in-one, where you try to plant as many as a vegetation of fruit trees in a close proximity. And sometimes, I don't know if that would take more water, but you're actually growing a lot of fruit in a small area of your landscape. So that's, and my question is there, and I don't know if Ms. Nolan or Commissioner Nolan knows this, but is there an average number? Do we have a model that could explain exactly what this looks like, or a landscape that actually?
If I could add this, in the model ordinance, and which is going to come back to you in about a month or so, are a set of regulations, implementation regulations. And included in that are a couple of examples of how to conduct how to do the math, and I don't know whether it explores different types of plantings. Now, the Planning Commission has had a committee appointed again to work on those regulations. And I don't know where they are right now, but maybe that's something that they could look in, particularly to address issues like fruit trees as opposed to decorative landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's an exception to the law for that. It's still landscaping, assuming we're talking about a residential property and not an agricultural land use.
No, it was just and I know this is, that's why I was asking, is this from the bill itself, or is this our restrictions, our guidelines? And I know Commissioner Nolan and Commissioner Nicklin have done a fantastic job reading this and trying to clarify what the bill actually says so that it could be user-friendly.
Which I can say, if you find in Section 3 of the ordinance, 10-2.1205, that is right out of the state law.
Yeah, the water efficiency
The water
standard.
efficiency, and that's really the core of what the state wanted, was the definitions and then this formula.
And if I could just add, not speaking to this, but generally, being a planner, we've implemented this ordinance, especially where I worked, where I did a lot of production housing tracts. And, this is really just meant to be like a cafeteria plan style. So when you work out this equation, if you have something that is a high water user, then you are usually geared or steered over to doing something that's really drought tolerant. So, where you're using something high, or you're planting vegetables or maybe a vegetable garden, then you may have more hardscape features, or you may have other things that then offset that. That's the whole point of it, is that by doing this process and going through this whole evaluation, you have to thoughtfully look at how you're doing your entire project, not just one element of it. And it has to come out to be water efficient. So I guess I kind of liken it to Title 24, how we've looked at those things with energy efficient. When you do your house, maybe you can increase the energy efficiency of your windows or your air conditioner because maybe you have more windows. It's kind of that type of thing. So you wouldn't be precluded from having something that used water, but you would have to address an offset somewhere else on the property.
Yeah, it definitely does make sense. And just a thought that just when you were explaining how you use your water, anything about gray water use, outdoor gray water? I mean, it's
the gray water systems are a whole different ballgame.
Would you have to take into consideration if somebody wants to have a tank and water their fruit trees or something, or that couldn't take in?
This ordinance, which was done, I think I read, was 2006. That was kind of before people were really starting to actively look into gray water systems. So I don't think it addressed that at all. But I mean, that is something that we've gotten questions about, and that I think that is worthwhile pursuing. I mean, I've seen people do that, but
I know our hands
separate.
are tied in to this point because we didn't try to customize in 2010 when this came out, but I'm a little weary how the state just tries to add a number and make every city follow it. I know it's a lot's happened since 2010, even in landscape profession. So, but I do think that we need to start planning on how we use our water and I know that this new concept has been implemented even in the Ojai Valley about trying to grow as much vegetation on the residential area as possible versus drought tolerant or other deciduous or
you mean edible vegetation?
Yeah, edible vegetation. So
yeah, and then when you get into the gray water systems, and then you're talking about putting gray water on things that then you're going to eat, then
that's true.
Yeah.
Any other questions from council for staff? This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. I have one speaker card. William Ulrich.
William Ulrich, 487 Gridley Road. Should be fairly apparent that since, once again, the city got ourselves, or we are in a situation where we're basically having to compensate for having missed a deadline, that this is a very complex issue. And if I heard correctly, it will require, for new developments of a certain size, a sign-off by a landscape architect, which is typically not a residential requirement. So that kind of steps things up a little bit as far as an additional cost to a property owner. I'm not sure that all of the council is actually fully understands the nature and the extent of this ordinance, especially because it's an adaptation of a state ordinance. And I first was brought to this to my attention when at the Planning Commission meeting of March 19th that I referenced earlier, when Mr. Fletcher provided the staff report in lieu of Ms. Wald. I queried that question. Once again, I didn't get an answer that responded to my query. The response I received stated that the city attorney's on a fixed fee retainer is no cost for him to attend the Planning Commission meeting, but that didn't explain why he was presenting a staff report. My concern, by extension, is whether staff actually understands the implications of this ordinance and will be able to explain it to homeowners or property owners who are looking at making a development of their property. And I'm really pretty much not convinced of it. Matter of fact, I'm pretty much not convinced that also from the perspective of notwithstanding the assistance of the planning commissioner who was referenced in interpreting this, that it will be something that a property owner will be able to comply with without undue and burdensome costs. Thank you.
Okay, would someone from staff like to respond to Mr. Ulrich's question? And it was...
Madam Mayor, I've got a question to follow up on what Mr. Ulrich had said, so maybe we can get some clarity to it. And I've got a couple of questions. When the state enacted its legislation, and they came up with this model ordinance, the model ordinance became law unless the state wrote its own ordinance, or the city wrote its own ordinance. And could the city's ordinance be less restrictive than the state's model ordinance?
No.
All right. So if we can't be less restrictive than the state's model ordinance, then what does this ordinance do that's any different than the state's model ordinance, other than what Mr. Fletcher referred to, and that is that if it's a self-built home, it's not triggered unless it's 5,000 square feet?
The two things. One is it integrates, and this is one thing the Planning Commission wanted to do, is it integrates these standards into our existing landscape permitting process rather than being a standalone separate entitlement process, which is what it's been right now. So what this ordinance does is amends the existing landscape requirements that we have in our code regarding landscape plan submittals and integrates them together so it's one document. And hopefully it simplifies the regulations so that they are to a degree more user-friendly. It's not, I mean, we agree, everyone agrees since these were first enacted, it's not simple. One comment to Mr. Ulrich's question. The vast majority, I think, and maybe Ms. Wold can even expand this, the vast majority of the time when someone has to submit landscape plans, they're prepared by a design professional already. So if you already follow, we don't know, and we've not tried to analyze how many projects in the city there are that are over 5,000 square feet of landscape area, but a property that otherwise doesn't have to go to design review. we think the overlap is significant, such it's a very small exception. That they would then they simply have to do the landscape plans and still be the exact same landscape package. So our goal is that integrated into our planning process as it is, rather than standalone, simpler at least more clearer regulations to ease the permitting process.
Now, did the state require that plans be signed off by a licensed landscape architect?
Yes.
And then I just have a question for Councilman Lara. How much in a typical basis is 2,500 feet of landscape? Is that a lot of landscape, or is that not much at all? I mean, is it an average amount?
I would say that it all depends where you're doing it, but there's definitely properties that exceed 2,500 square feet here in Ojai fairly easy. So when that's taken into account when you're trying to design a landscape, I mean, to pay for that extra architect, it makes a big difference. And Mr. Ulrich is correct that it would burden a lot of times the resident, the homeowner.
Okay, but it's not that this is going to overburden the homeowner. The ordinance that's been in effect under the model ordinance has been overburdening the homeowner, and we have no control over that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just another example of the state mandating things that may be unduly burdensome to our citizens. Okay.
And just as a follow-up, when researching the uses of water and going to the OBGMA meetings and everything, most of our water usage is in agriculture to begin with. Like 90% of our water usage is. So again, the state is coming down hard on residents when most of the majority of the usage is done in agriculture anyways. So I know every little bit helps, but if you look at it as a whole picture, most of the water isn't even being used by the citizens. So it's really interesting. It's the graphs that they show and everything. It's pretty fascinating. So it's just adding another burden to our citizens, and it's unfortunate.
And if I could just add, I was just going to say that, when this first came out, there was a real learning curve to it and a lot of adjustment. It's been out for a really long time, and landscapers, they routinely do this. It's second nature to them at this point. If you get a project in, since I've been here in Ojai, I haven't worked on one, but like where I came from before, we get a commercial project in, it just comes in with the natural role. It's so second nature to everyone who works with this now. So it is mandated by the state, but we're so far down the line now with it that it's just second nature. This seems new, but all this equation, and as Joe said, the math part of it, they just submit it. It's not like you're going to pay for anything more than they're already doing it, because it's common throughout the state of California.
You mentioned commercial though, right? Yeah. So.
Right. Most cities have this. Just to give you an example, with a 6,000 square foot single family home, you're going to have anywhere from maybe 1,500 to 2,000, 2,500 in just the house. Because you're going to have a garage is 400 square feet. You're going to have 1,500 or so, or 2,000 for a house. That's 2,500. You're way below the threshold. So you're going to talk about bigger lots. Bigger lots might have bigger homes, or you may have I don't see them, but you may have other issues. You may have a bigger garage or something like that. It's just really not going to hit that threshold with the average, maybe 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in an average lot. If you're going to be doing a custom home, then I would assume that it would aid the homeowner, because that person has to know what expenses they're going to have in a water, as far as their water bill. So this helps them get to that point. So whatever money they put into it ultimately is going to save them money in the long run, as they understand how that maintenance of that house is going to fall out for them.
Thank you.
Okay, and we still have the public hearing open. Is there, Scott?
Scott Eicher, 501 Park Road. Does this ordinance apply strictly to new construction, or is it triggered by remodeling? And if so, what are those thresholds? And could conceivably someone with an art studio that's 10 by 15 feet, that's decrepit, and they want to tear it down and put in a new art studio the same size, would that trigger this landscape ordinance? Or if they replaced a roof, would that trigger the ordinance?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to answer. It applies to rehabilitation projects as well as new projects, but it also has to have a landscape element. If someone is just adding on to their house, they're not doing any landscaping as part of the project, I don't think they have to do this. And roof projects, no. But it does apply to remodeling projects as well as new. Now, I would ask Ms. Wald, who's implemented this, whether this has been applied to, because this is one of the fears when the law came down first, was I'm doing a room addition on my house, do I have to, and I've got a 3,000 square foot landscape yard, do I have to now retroactively go back
Right.
and run through this exercise for my existing yard?
I've never seen that.
Right, and that's been my opinion. And they're doing some landscape work as part of the project. So the vast majority of the time, we're talking about either a very large, very significant remodeling project or new construction.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience have questions or comments on this issue? Then I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to council.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Interestingly enough, I think it was Monday's LA Times had an article about landscaping and lawns in Las Vegas. Apparently Lake Mead is getting so low due to this drought that 2 of the intake pipes are higher than the level of the lake. As far as use for residences, it's lawns, LAWNS. Lawns, if you live in the dry west, are the biggest exploiters of water, besides farming. And face it, you cannot have a green New Jersey lawn in the Great West. It just is not really conceivable with our current drought and what's going to be happening. So it was a very interesting article. So we're looking at lawns as the biggest waster of water. I'm not saying that we have to prohibit our lawn in Sarasota Park. I want our lawn because it promotes so many activities. But personal lawn, beautiful green Kentucky grass lawns in the southwest of this country are really not in keeping with what our water use is.
Any other comments, council? Someone like to make a motion? No. Okay, then I'll make a motion. I would move that we introduce an ordinance which amends Title 10, Chapter 2, Article 12 of the Ojai Municipal Code regarding water-efficient landscaping standards, and ask the city clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
Second.
Roll call and then read the title.
Blatt?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
An ordinance of the City of Ojai, California, amending Title 10, Chapter 2, Article 12 of the Ojai Municipal Code related to landscape water efficiency standards.
Okay, the next item on our agenda, City of Ojai Crime Statistics 2013, Captain Kinney.
Yay. Okay. Madam Mayor, members of council, this administrative report is going to give you the crime stats for the year 2013. The information contained in this report was compiled from Sheriff's Crime Analysis records as well as Ojai Police Department records. And for a broader perspective, of law enforcement activity in the city, we're going to present the 2000 statistics along with those from previous years. Where pertinent statistics from unincorporated Ojai will be included. And crime, just so you know, is down in the city for the second year in a row. And this report's going to be a breakdown of the Part 1 and Part 2 crimes, the arrests that were made, the Ojai Municipal Code violations that were enforced, our calls for service, our police response times, as well as traffic violations and citations. So starting with the Part 1 crimes, this is Attachment A. Part 1 crimes, so you know, they're the most serious. These crimes are reported to the Department of Justice by agencies throughout the country. They're used by the FBI in their annual crime in the United States Statistical Report. And the Part 1 crimes are broken down into two separate categories. The first is crimes against persons. And those include rape, robbery, homicide, and aggravated assaults. In 2013, these increased by 1 case for a total of 14 cases. That's an 8% increase from the previous year. I will note, though, that if you look up there, the 14 cases, 2 of those were actually occurred in 2011 and 1 in 2012, but they were reported in 2013, so we had to include them in the report. And on the aggravated assaults, on 2 of the 7 cases, there was 2 victims, so they consider those additional crimes. The crimes against property, that's the second part of Part 1 crimes, and that's burglary, grand theft, petty theft, auto theft, and arson. In 2013, these decreased by 58 cases for a total of 105 cases. This is a 36% reduction from the previous year. So overall, there were 57 fewer Part 1 crimes reported in 2013 than in 2012, and that's a 32% reduction in Part 1 crime in the city of Ojai. And this chart here will show you that the vast majority of Part 1 crimes continue to involve theft of property, which would be your auto theft, your petty theft, your burglary, grand theft. That's the majority. This chart, I'm not sure if you can see it, you may have to refer to your booklet. This is going to give you a historical perspective of Part 1 crime over the last 22 years. In 1992, the total number of Part 1 crimes was 316, compared to 119 in 2013. During the same time period, the number of crimes per 1,000 persons have dropped from a rate of 41.31 per 1,000 persons to the current rate of 15.77 per 1,000 persons, and this is the lowest crime rate in 22 years. Our Part 2 crimes are right here. That's Attachment C. Attachment C lists Part 2 crimes, which are crime classifications other than those defined as Part 1. They include simple assaults, sex offenses that are not rapes, vandalisms, and other crimes. In 2013, Part 2 crimes decreased in the city of Ojai by 28%. You can see it increased across the board, or decreased, I'm sorry. Next, we're going to talk about arrests. Attachment D will list the arrests. It shows a comparison of arrest activity between city and unincorporated Ojai Valley. In 2013, the number of arrests in the city increased by 23% from the previous year. There was 287 arrests in 2012 and 353 arrests in the city in 2013. In the Ojai Valley, the number of arrests actually decreased by 1% from 775 to 766 in 2013. It should be noted that most arrests in both the city and the Ojai Valley are for misdemeanor violations, and that a majority of those arrested on misdemeanors are actually released on citations to appear in court, and they're not taken to jail and booked. There's the county. The municipal code violations. In 2013, officers enforced the Ojai Municipal Code 75 times, and this does not take into account the number of violations officers enforced in the city by giving verbal warnings. This attachment E shows the breakdown for the individual violations where arrests and citations were handed out, and the most common Municipal code violations addressed by arrest or citation were consumption of alcohol beverages in the park. There was 24 violations. Unlawful sleeping or camping in parking lots was 9 violations. 9 violations for skateboard protective gear not being worn, and also 9 violations for skateboard park violations. And then there were some others there, and you can see them right there. Attachment F is the next one in your packet, and that's going to be our calls for service. Attachment F reveals all of the various calls for service officers responded to in 2013 at the request of the public. The most common call for service is made through the Sheriff's Communication Center, which is our dispatch in Ventura. Other forms of calls can be generated via walk-in reports at the police station, as well as citizen contacts in the field with officers in the field. In 2013, officers responded to 2,939 calls from the public. This was a decrease of 426 calls from the previous year. The top generating calls for service in 2013 involved disturbances and suspicious subjects. Attachment F gives a perspective on the types and the numbers of calls that the police receive. And the following categories are somewhat nondescript, so I'll give you a definition. A disturbance call is a music call, party call, equipment noise, fireworks, things of that nature. Non-criminal is generally abandoned vehicles, well-being checks, dead bodies, public service. The other calls are 911 hang-ups, warrant arrests, illegal dumping, suicidal persons, and then suspicious circumstances, which we do have a lot of those calls, are prowlers, suspicious persons, and suspicious vehicles. And as I stated last year, I don't have a problem with the suspicious person calls because it tells me the public's helping us police the city. They're letting us know when they see something suspicious so we can come out and check it out. So I think that's a good thing. Oops. Okay, looks like police response times, which I don't see it, Rhonda.
Oh.
You should have it in your packet.
Attachment G.
Yeah, it's attachment G, police response times. Attachment G will show police response times within the city for the years 2011 through 2013. The times shown are from the time the call is received in Sheriff's Dispatch Center until the officer arrives at the call. The call priority types in Attachment G are also nondescript, and I'll give you some definitions. E, or emergency, those are Code 3 responses automatically. They include injury, accidents, domestic violence in progress, things of that nature. It's classified as an immediate call. It's a confirmed crime or felony in progress. An urgent call could be an in-progress alarm call, a non-injury accident, someone trespassing, something of that nature. Routine calls are report calls, crimes where there's no suspect information or no suspect on scene. And then the other category is just all the other calls our CAD system has to log regarding the officer's activity in the fields. In 2013, the time it took police to respond to the emergency calls basically remained unchanged from the previous year. It was 5.40 minutes in 2013 and 5.32 in 2012. Response times to immediate calls decreased from 6.23 minutes to 5.56. Travel time in the city decreased across the board for only 3.49 minutes for emergency calls, 3.60 minutes for immediate calls, and 4.32 minutes for urgent calls, and also 5.56 minutes for routine calls. And then on average, once the officers arrived on scene, they spent 28 minutes resolving the issue. Traffic citations is attachment H, and that'll list the various traffic violations that we enforced in the city in 2013. Officers issued traffic citations for 685 traffic violations. The most common violations included unregistered vehicles, that was 120, driving while using cell phones was 102, and rolling and running stop signs was 86. And the total number of violations that were written in 2013 is up significantly from the previous year when officers issued citations for 455 violations. The traffic collisions is attachment I, and in 2013, there was 102 traffic collisions recorded in the city. That represents a 2% increase over the previous year when there were only 100 traffic collisions recorded. Of the 102 traffic collisions in 2013, 68 of those were classified as non-injury. The other 34 collisions were classified as resulting in injury. 7 drivers involved in the 102 traffic collisions were found to be under the influence of alcohol, which is an increase of 75% in DUI-related traffic collisions in the city. Officers made 29 arrests for driving under the influence in 2013, and there were no fatality collisions in 2013. I will say during the first 3 months of this year, the traffic collisions are now down 52%. Finally, I'll just speak on some of the other things that the officers did. In 2013, our officers conducted 560 parole and probation searches at residences in both Ojai and the Ojai Valley, and these searches resulted in the arrest of 231 individuals for a variety of criminal charges. This is an increase over the previous year when 520 searches were conducted that resulted in 194 arrests. And these are operations that officers conduct during their downtime. They're targeted on specific individuals who are on probation and parole and living within the city or in the unincorporated Ojai. And they don't take into account all the other searches our officers do, whether they be on a call for service or a vehicle stop or something of that nature. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have one question, and it may have been in here somewhere, but did we have any violations of our social host ordinance?
One in the county and none in the city.
Excellent.
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
All right.
Can you explain, what's the difference, Captain, between reported crimes and arrests?
Well, a reported crime would be when the public calls us for a call for service. An arrest can result out of that, but there may not be an arrest also. It could be just be a crime report or an incident report or domestic violence incident report. An arrest is an arrest, and that's where we take someone to jail. They're charged with a crime, or they're cited and released and expected to appear in court.
Okay. And nowhere in here does it reflect any of the convictions?
No.
Any other comments, questions?
Madam Mayor? Yes.
Councilmember
Well,
Ward?
thank you, Chief, for this report. Very interesting. My question has to do with the collisions. Is there a specific location that is a hot spot for collisions?
Yeah, we, in our briefing room, we track collisions on a map of the city. And it's a pin chart, and every month has a different color, and we basically put a pin where there's traffic collisions. And since I've been here, and even when I was here back in 1990, the Y, we have a lot of collisions there. We have a lot of collisions inside the arcade, which are generally fender benders. Some of the most serious collisions occur on the Villanova curve. And so those are the hot spots. And we work those spots. We work a lot of people coming in and out of the Vaughn Shopping Center turn against signs that say they're not supposed to turn left or right, and they make those violations, and those cause collisions. So we work that area quite frequently. And then the distracted driving is my belief that using the cell phones and all of that, I think those cause a lot of collisions, and we just don't know about it. And so we do focus on that as well.
Okay, great. And then, so you could basically say it's more of the highway, the Caltrans, any suggestions how to work with Caltrans
To make it, yeah. I think we're doing a good job, and Greg Grant's doing a good job with the new sidewalks and the flashing lights. I think that's a start. My new sergeant that's here, my new administrative sergeant, he is what I consider an expert in traffic. He ran the Thousand Oaks Motor Detail for many years, and so he's got some ideas on doing some different things and preventative type stuff. So I'm looking forward to putting those forward.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments from council? I don't have any speaker cards. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment? I don't see anyone. All right, and I don't think we have an action we have to take on this. This is just receive and file. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The next item on our agenda, appointments to the Historic Preservation Commission. Okay, this is basically, for historic preservation, this is basically reappointments. Our subcommittee was myself, Councilmember Laura, and Historic Preservation Chair McCready. We're recommending the reappointment of Terry Hill, Craig Walker, Darren McCready, and even with those three recommendations, there is still a vacancy on the Historic Preservation Commission, and it will have to be filled by a resident of the city. We do not have applications. So if there's anyone out there interested in serving on the Historic Preservation Commission, get an application into us. So that's our recommendation. We recommend the reappointment of Terry Hill, Craig Walker, and Darren McCready. Did Councilmember Laura, do you have any comments?
No comment, just it was it's great to meet with the three of them and get their perspective on how the Historic Preservation Commission was, and that's it.
I just want to comment that, once again, we have Craig Walker, who is not a resident of the city, but he is such a good Historic Preservation Commissioner. He's lived here for all his life. He loves the Ojai Valley, and I just sincerely am happy that we did not decide that everyone has to live within the 4 square miles of our city.
Madam Mayor, I think that all three of these current commissioners are excellent commissioners, and with that, I'll move to approve as recommended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Okay, the next item on our agenda is appointments to the Parks and Recreation Commission. And the subcommittee for this, again, was myself, Councilmember Laura, and Parks and Recreation Chair Randy Haney. And again, we're recommending reappointment of Sunday Rylander, Robert Roderick, Austin Becker as our youth commissioner. With those reappointments, there are no vacancies. There would be no vacancies on the Parks and Rec Commission.
I had one
Councilmember Laura?
question. On Austin Becker, he lives at 100 Longhorn Lane. He wrote, "Are you a registered voter of the city of Ojai? No dash student." I presume he's a registered voter of the county then, right?
Well, he's our youth commissioner.
But he's over 18.
No,
don't
he's
think so.
not.
Oh, he's not. Okay,
No.
thank you very much. Okay. I thought he was. Never mind.
And just like the last, I just love talking with our commissioners, because just like historic preservation, I think we have good Parks and Recreation commissioners too. So it was a pleasure to just re-interview them for their reappointment. So. I move, if I may, could I move to approve and their reappointment?
Second? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the next item on our agenda. Now, the next item is the appointments or reappointments to the Arts Commission. And we had previously, I'm looking for it here. Okay. At the council meeting of March the 11th, the council ratified the appointment of Heather Stobo to fill a vacancy. And the interviews that Councilmember Blatz, Commission Chair Golden, and myself, the ones that we're submitting for ratification tonight would be reappointments. And those reappointments would be Linda Harmon, Roger Conrad. Any comments?
I move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The next item is determining dates of regular meetings to be canceled for summer recess. Mr. Clark, do you have any comments on this?
No, other than we like to get this done early so that we can, for planning purposes.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I know that I will miss the Tuesday, July 8th meeting, and most likely the Tuesday, September 9th meeting. So those are the two that I would miss. I hope one of them at least becomes a meeting where we are dark.
July 8th and September 23rd?
No, September 9th.
September 9th? Any other comments? Preferences?
Well, I just have a, if anything, I guide my schedule according to where my girls go to school, so when they're in session, when they're out of session. So, I personally, it all depends, I guess, for the priority. It's what's on our agenda for me. And is there any of those dates that look like, I guess, is staff, there's going to be a lack of staff or any reason? Because to me, it's sometime in July, maybe the end of August, September. That's when school usually starts. To me, I'm going to be here most of the time, so it all depends on the workload. If we have a lot on the table.
No, I'm flexible on any of these dates. Let's keep in mind that Carol will need to miss Tuesday, July the 8th, and Tuesday, September the 9th.
Yeah.
Those two would be fine with me.
Yeah, June is our heavy-duty schedule because we have budget.
Mhm.
Yes.
And we never know if we'll have additional meetings for the budget. So once the budget is done, I think the rest is basically up to the council's pleasure as if what their vacation plans are.
Yeah. Councilmember Clapp,
I'm fine with that, I think. I'm checking here.
Okay, so it sounds like we're pretty much agreed to cancel Tuesday, July the 8th, and Tuesday, September the 9th.
I have a question about neighborhood planning and everything. Is that going to impede us to do any type of, is there anything right now that's on the priority chart that we need to meet for during those times?
There's enough flexibility on scheduling that we can work around one missed meeting.
And we can always call a special meeting.
Yeah, I think we're soon going to be coming forward with the visioning process. And at the last meeting, the council had indicated a preference of at least starting that during the summer. So we may end up scheduling some special meetings for visioning. But that remains to be seen.
Okay.
Okay, do we need a motion for that? Yes. We need a motion to adopt a resolution determining the dates to be canceled.
Well, I guess I should offer it. I make a motion that meetings to be canceled will be Tuesday, July 8th, and Tuesday, September 9th, and those meetings will be canceled due to 2014 summer recess.
Second.
Roll call. Blatz?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes. The next item, we're going to adjourn as the city council convene as the Ojai Development Successor Agency. We have the consent calendar.
Madam Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, and I'll just note that agency member Clapp would probably want to abstain on that, since you were absent.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Roll call?
Blatz?
Yes.
Clapp?
Abstain.
Laura?
Yes.
Smith? Yes. Strobel?
Yes. And I'll note that Councilmember Clapp is abstaining as to item B only.
Correct.
We're going to adjourn the successor agency meeting and reconvene city council. Comments or reports from the council members?
I just have a quick report. I had the pleasure to be invited to the vocational and job career for Nordhoff High School and representing city government. Yeah. And there was a lot of interesting questions regarding city government, and I thought it was great for them to get to actually just ask what it was about, and I was trying to offer the most exciting explanation, but it was not happening. But I saw that they were so interested in it, and I want to thank Nordhoff High School students, along with Nordhoff, the Youth Foundation, and Rotary West that put this on. So it was a great event. So I'm happy. It seems like they're far ahead of where I was in high school. So.
Any other comments?
I do. I just very happy to announce that I am a member of the Ojai Community Chorus, which is really supported by the city council. Usually we give them a grant of about $1,000 every other year. And I'm not a good enough singer to have a lead role, but we're having a wonderful concert on Saturday, May 3rd, 7 p.m., and Sunday, May 4th at 3 at the Ojai United Methodist Church, and it's right on Church Road. And we're recreating a Hollywood canteen in the early 1940s with all the wonderful songs of that era and the costumes and everything. And if you have time, please show up, because it is a wonderful community event. Everyone volunteers, except we have to pay the chorus leader and the musicians. But Saturday, May 3rd and Sunday, May 4th, do show up. We work on a very tight budget, but you're going to have such a good time. I highly recommend it.
And I'll just comment that the 114th tennis tournament will be starting tomorrow through the 27th, and they distributed a really impressive brochure in the Ojai Valley News that outlines all the events and has some really interesting stories. Really good job on that. And I'd like to remind people that there will be an open house on at the Boyd Center, Sarasota Park, on May the 10th from 11 a.m. until 3 p.m. And they'll be doing the ribbon cutting on some of the improvements and reconstruction that has been going on over there. And I'm very sad to announce that longtime employee, the wife of a longtime employee, Brian Meadows, his wife Bev, passed away. And there will be a memorial service for her at the San Buenaventura Mission on Saturday, April the 26th at 9 a.m. So not everyone knew Bev, but I did, and I was very saddened to hear of her passing. So I would like to adjourn the meeting in memory of Bev. And that's all I have. Mr. Clark?
Thank you. At the next City Council meeting, which is on May 13th, we have a workshop with the Planning Commission at 6 o'clock. And we've invited our special counsel on telecommunication facilities, Mr. Kramer, to attend that meeting. And our objective is to receive input from the commission, the council, and the public on the future telecommunications facility ordinance that we'll be working on as we go forward. And so I know there's a lot of interest in the community about that, and we'd encourage people to attend and to bring their questions so that we can provide answers.
Mr. Fletcher? Our city clerk, any comments?
Yes, I would just like to comment that Joe DeVito brought a group of third graders here and toured City Hall, and it was very interesting to see their ideas and what they thought government was. And the number one question, though, is how many people were buried in the cemetery? So I don't know what was on their mind, but that was cute. Yes. And then it's never too early to question about the upcoming election. The candidate period will be July 4th through August 12th, so I'm already starting to get calls, but I just wanted to put the word out there that welcome any calls for any information on the upcoming election in November.
Captain Kinney?
Yeah, really.
Running's the worst.
Mr. Grant?
Good evening. I just want to quickly say thank you to the American Legion, volunteered their efforts over at the cemetery recently, and they went through and did another thorough cleaning of that. And so they've done that twice in the past year now. It's been a very nice volunteer effort. And then second of all, the Star, it might have been Ann, had a very nice article over the weekend about the median over Maricopa Highway. So that's the effort. The crew, our public works crew, got involved and cleaned out all the existing weeds and put all the native plants in. So it's really looking great now. It's got all the, it's definitely the California poppies and the purple. I can't think of it.
Really nice.
The Nordhoff colors, right? So it's looking great out there. Thanks for the article. That was nice. Thanks.
Mrs. Mears, any comments? No comments. Okay, I don't see anyone else. If there's nothing further, meeting adjourned.